You know, we sing this hymn, Faith of the Free, and it talks about the heroes of ages past who stood up and spoke for a free religious tradition, for the freedom of conscience. And we sometimes, I feel like we lift it up as if it's something that others have handed to us, but it's not necessarily something that we really see ourselves as claiming and being a part of and needing to keep alive and needing to take to the next level. That we are being called to be as heroic as the previous generations on behalf of freedom. And so in a fall like this, a season like this, when gay marriage is made legal in Oklahoma and more across the nation, and we think of the ways in which this congregation and the faith that we represent has been standing along with our gay and lesbian brothers and sisters over many decades for equality, and we recognize that we too are called to be heroes in this age and in this time in our own ways. And I don't know if you realize it, but we here at All Souls, when I say we, I mean you and I, are in the process of creating a new culture. We are creating a new culture for ourselves and also as a contribution to American culture. Now, you may be wondering, what kind of culture is it that we are creating that is so different from mainstream American culture? I mean, first of all, mainstream American culture seems to be more interested right now in the latest pictures of Kim Kardashian's rear end than they are in the hungry and the homeless in our cities. We here at All Souls are well into the process of creating a culture in which everyone has a valued place at the table. Now, it's not a male table where women are invited as guests as long as they act enough like men. And it's not a white table just with colorful faces around it. And it's not a Christian table with Jews and Buddhists and atheists and others around the periphery. It's an authentically intercultural and interfaith table that we are creating. It's not just a rich person's or a formally educated person's or an old person's or a young person's table. It's everyone's table. It's not a straight person's table that benevolently welcomes lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people out of the kindness of our hearts, as long as they behave themselves. It is a human table that accepts the full breadth of our humanity and of human sexuality. It's not a table that requires having papers or credentials or government-issued IDs in order to have a full and honored place. And I hope that it won't be long before it's not even a mostly English speakers table, but could and should become a United Nations of languages. This culture, this way of being human that we are shaping and creating and promoting right here with our lives and our resources says all life matters, not just human life. Sexuality is considered sacred, and so it's not something to be avoided or abused or shamed. Race matters, so we don't shy away from the important discussions that still need to be had about how racialized our society is and what are the costs. One in which money is a tool for living a life of meaning and not an end in itself. It's a culture in which discussions about immigrants, the incarcerated, the poor are not bolstered by slogans and superficial sound bites. And that means that discussions and sermons on these topics lead to real action. It's a culture in which science is a central foundation, in which spirituality is a personal choice, and in which public service is a norm. It's a culture in which religion is focused on this world. If you're anything like me, you don't want to be part of a religion that threatens and scares people about some hell in the next life. Nor A religion that promises people about a heaven with streets paved in gold. I want a religion that focuses on the real hells that we can see every day right here in this world, like hunger and homelessness and domestic abuse and addiction and oppression and violence and more. These are the living hells that we see right in front of our own eyes, and these should be the focus of a modern religion. As far as I'm concerned, you can have your imaginary streets paved in gold in the future. I want basic transportation for all right here, right now. No, it's a culture and a community that has love as its spirit and service as its law. Are you interested in being a part of such a culture? That's the question before you today. Because there are some things that we need to do you need to do if you're going to be a part of this that we are creating with our lives, and with our hearts, and with our souls, and with every ounce of our being. Are you interested in helping us create a new and profound and more just way of being? Can you imagine what the world could and would look like if we were successful? If we were even partially successful? Here's an example. We have a collaboration between our Partners in Education group here at All Souls and our Community Resource Bank with the Food Bank of Eastern Oklahoma. And we've begun serving meals and bringing groceries to families in our 3 partner schools that we have here in the community. So once a month at each of the schools, so 3 times a month, putting on a meal for the families as well as bringing groceries. This week it was Gilcrease Middle School, and Tuesday night, as you may recall, it was cold out. Many of the families walk because they don't have transportation. One mom walked in with 6 kids, ages 5 through 12. Their clothes were dirty because their water had been cut off about a week ago. They ate dinner, and then, thanks to the Community Resource Bank and the food bank, they had access to, if they wanted to, 3 full bags of groceries to take with them home. Now the mother, she took the 3 bags and then she asked for some other bags, and so she separated all the food into a bunch of bags, and all these kids walked home with bags of groceries in their hands. Now we asked the principal, and the principal said that they live about 1.5 miles away. And they walked in the dark and in the cold. But that night, they had fellowship with other families and with some of us. There was no judgment, and they were able to meet with the teachers and the principal who ate with them as well, and everyone ate together, and we came together, and they knew that people were interested in them, and they were clearly interested in us. Part of these dinners is an opportunity for the teachers to be able to meet with the parents who they say they haven't been able to reach very effectively through the traditional parent-teacher evenings. And we know that parent involvement in their children's education is one of the key factors for success. So this kind of direct service that we're doing in the schools, including our Reading Buddies program and the camps and the soccer clubs and more, is allowing more and more of our members to see what's really going on in this city. And then in conversation with the people that we're meeting, we're taking action to create larger systemic changes. For example, in recent years, our partner schools have been filled more and more with Hispanic children who are moving into the community. And the schools were having trouble getting consistent attendance and performance from many of these students. So with the advocacy and networking of our member Nancy McDonald and our Partners in Education committee, we started soccer teams. Well, this quickly changed the dynamics. Kids could not play if they missed class, or if their grades were not good, or if they had disciplinary issues. Suddenly, school engagement for these children and their families skyrocketed. We started with one school a couple of years ago, Last year we had 5 schools, and this year there are 9 schools. And there are 2 to 3 teams per school. There are 1,200 kids that are now playing soccer and who are positively engaged in school. Of course, they need shoes and they need uniforms, and our folks are doing what they can to provide slowly these things to these young kids. They wear whatever they have and they play, but when our kids go to other schools in the district to play soccer, they want to feel proud of themselves and their team and not be laughed at or teased by the other kids. Now, this took a lot of advocacy and a lot of organizing to get buses. We bused the kids there. Then the parents wanted to come, and they said, but we don't have transportation. Is there any way you can help us get there? So we started finding ways to transport and help the parents get to the games. And we've seen more and more the performance of the kids in school just getting better and better. And it's helping to create community with these families between themselves, as well as with the school, and as well as with us. One of the problems that I've learned in being involved in this is that in many of these low-income schools, many of the families live in Section 8 housing, and so there's a lot of mobility, a lot of moving around. Sometimes a year could be a long time to live in where they're living, or sometimes it's just a few months, and so they're moving all around all the time. So there isn't really a sense of ownership in the neighborhood or in the school, or so that people aren't setting down the kinds of roots and taking the kind of pride in their neighborhood, in their home. And so when that happens, you also see increases in violence and crime and things like that. But just this past week, there were 150 people out at the soccer game, at one of these soccer games. Parents, grandparents, friends, neighbors, all gathering around the soccer, taking pride in their children, taking pride in the school. Recently, a mother came up to Nancy, said, Miss Nancy, we've decided we're going to stay in the Gilcrease neighborhood because our kids have done so well in soccer. So we're finding that because of the soccer programs and the reading programs and the job fairs and the other things, the camps and things we're doing in the schools, that families are starting to stick around longer. And this is already starting to build community and hopefully will increase everybody's commitment to the neighborhood and the schools and the children's education, and hopefully will continue to reduce the other ills that come from violence, crime, and other things that come from these types of mobile and impoverished communities. And if you're looking to get involved, we're always needing bus drivers, more and more bus drivers, and carpoolers and others for the soccer games. You could read to a child, we know that there are 300 middle schoolers that need reading buddies this year. Maybe you need one too. Someday soon, I think it would be wonderful if all of the children in all 3 of our schools would have bikes, because we also have a bike ministry that we're doing with them, uniforms, sneakers, as well as learn how to read and have paper and pencils to do their work. And that's something that we can do. And we're on our way to doing it. We're going to need a volunteer coordinator pretty soon with all the things that we're doing and all the people getting involved. That's just the kind of thing that we're going to need to have so that we can take the next step, because it's more than any volunteers can do on their own. But we are changing the lives of these children and this community and building relationships for ourselves that are helping us see what the world around us really looks like, because it's so easy to get isolated and not even know how people are living in this community. You know, when Joe Nuri from our church he brings the food after one of these meals, anything that's left over, to the Day Center for the Homeless. Shows up just in time. It's kind of dinner's already been over a couple hours ago, and he shows up with all this food. And right away, when he walks in, he says they recognize him now, and they say, "Hey, All Souls is here." And they bring out the food. Do you know that we are distributing over 2 tons of food every month? All Souls is in this community. I also spoke with Riley Kern and his partner Laurel. They head up our prison ministries at All Souls. I was talking to Riley, and as I did, I realized one of the ways that you can tell whether an organization's work is authentic and is valuable is through looking at who's attracted to doing it. Something that really inspires me is the fact that one of our co-chairs, Laurel, spent time herself in prison. And she is someone who had to fight her way through this system, and it has given her an incredible motivation and a lot of insight about what the system needs. She has recently graduated from law school and just in the last couple of weeks passed the bar. But I can tell you that if she thought that our work was not genuine and impactful, that Laurel would not be wasting her time because she's going where the impact is. Riley tells a story about two guys who are taking the world religions class that Randy Lewis started a couple of years ago and that Riley is continuing for us. And one of these two is a practicing Muslim. I'll call him Ali. I'm changing the names just for privacy purposes. I could ask Laurel her permission, but I couldn't ask them. So Ali was a Muslim, and then another person, Kevin, was a staunch evangelical Baptist. And in the first week of the class, there was a noticeable tension between these two men. But by the end of the 6-week class, Ali and Kevin were leading conversations on their pod with other inmates about religious experience. It happened to be Ramadan, and Ali was fasting, and some of the others in the jail were giving him a hard time, and Kevin stuck up for him. This class is a program that Randy and Riley dreamed up, but we don't know of any other like it in the country. And this is just one story of one of the classes where religious difference went from a point of confrontation to these two men becoming friends. At first, it was their differences that separated them, and now it's their differences that have become a central part of their connection and their friendship. And while we're building relationships and doing direct service, Laurel and other members of the team last week met with the Oklahoma Policy Institute and went to Oklahoma City to discuss why Oklahoma incarcerates more women by far than any other state in the United States. And the United States incarcerates more people than any other country in the world. I could go on and on. I could talk about the two house groups that go out every week and help to build or restore homes in this community. You know, they have restored or built over 150 homes now in this community. Now, these are homes where roofs leak, the plumbing doesn't work, where sometimes there's chickens running around in the kitchen, where there's wind coming through the walls, where people are living like this all over our city. The conditions they sometimes find are inhumane, but the owners do not have the resources to repair them or cannot afford to cannot afford to lose them. Our teams show up like angels from heaven. Last year, we funded our 38th and our 39th microcredit bank in Central America. So these are lending circles that we've helped to create since the early 90s, and is one of the most life-changing programs that is helping to defeat poverty in the developing world of any that we've seen. 39 banks are having tangible results and transforming the lives of thousands of families every year. And when you extrapolate that year after year after year, since the mid-90s, we're talking about tens of thousands of people who've been impacted and lifted out of poverty, not from a handout, but because we gave them a hand up and a chance to lift themselves out of poverty and start a business themselves. And to my knowledge, not one of those 39 lending circles or micro banks has failed that we've started, more than any other church anywhere that we know of. Now, our green team has people coming to this church from many different churches around the city, and what they're saying is that All Souls is where it's happening. If people are interested in taking action and doing real advocacy for change on the environment, that this is the church to come to. And we saw just this past summer, a film crew from Paris came from French television station because they heard that there was a church in Oklahoma that was doing this kind of work and had a passion for environmental justice. And they thought that sounded like a pretty interesting story because, as you know, Oklahoma is not known for our stands on the environment. I could go on and on. There's hundreds of these stories. But let me end by sharing with you just a little bit about what fuels my passion for justice and for service. I've mentioned before, and I've mentioned it a number of times, even in the last couple of months, that in my late teens, I wrestled with drugs and addiction. So I've been talking a lot about that very openly, more and more recently. And what really pulled me out of that drug and culturally induced stupor was a study abroad program in my junior year of college called Semester at Sea. 400 other college students from around the country, and I, and 19 professors traveled around the world on a ship for a semester, and we studied while we were on board, and then when we got off, we had experiential learning opportunities in the different ports, like Yugoslavia, India, China, Egypt, Malaysia, Turkey, Russia, and a number of other countries. Now, prior to that trip, I had spent a few years in what I like to call now, a white fog. And it's quite common among suburban American teens still today. The fog is really more like a smoldering fire. The kind of fire where there's not a lot of flame or heat, but lots of smoke. I was a rebel without a cause. I had a sense of being disenfranchised and filled with a kind of existential angst about my own life and my own place in it. But my eyes were opened as I traveled to different countries and gained a much broader understanding of what it means to be human and to be alive on this earth at this time. And suddenly it hit me over the head like a 2x4 that having been born in the late 20th century in the United States of America, and especially being male, white, heterosexual, able-bodied, and with access to higher education, that I'd been given the opportunities and the possibilities to have real influence and power over how the world is and what the future looks like, whether I wanted it or was willing to claim it or not. Suddenly I realized that my angst had nothing to do with the fact that I was somehow displaced, disempowered, and alienated, but it came from my head being in the fog. The truth I was confronted with on that trip was that the world is filled with incredible beauty and with a lot of serious inequality and pain. I happen to be born into a situation, not of my own making, that afforded me a set of circumstances that could be used in two primary ways. I could live and work and act to reinforce the status quo, culturally, economically, and socially. It is a status quo which can allow a person like me to benefit disproportionately from the beauty and the opportunities of this world. And it can even allow a person like me to be protected from and cut off and isolated from a lot of the problems and the pain of this world, not just in India and Malaysia and China, but right here, a few miles away in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But on the other hand, I could choose to use the entree that I had been given by life to achieve access to the levers of power and influence that could begin to create real change towards a culture and a society that's more just, equitable, and sustaining. In other words, I could sell my soul for the benefit of myself, or I could redeem my life by using it, the gifts that I've been given, for the common good. Now, that was enough of a reality check to sober me up as I reached my early 20s. Suddenly, the heat of the smoldering embers in my heart was turned up, and my heart was filled with a blazing fire for justice. And when that happened, as it does with any fire that is no longer smoldering with low heat, the smoke cleared away, and I saw a purpose and felt a passion for my life. Now, I know that you have your own story about what drives your passion to be part of something that is using your gifts for the good of the world. And I know that you have your own version of what breaks your heart and fuels your purpose. And I look forward to having chances in this community for us to share not only the work we do, but the reasons that we do it. The leadership of All Souls and I are intentionally trying to attract people who share this vision, to nurture and support those who are already here, so that we can grow together as leaders, deploy ourselves as activists, and build partnerships like the one we have with the food bank and the schools and the Day Center for the Homeless and the YWCA and others. So my charge to you, if you believe in this vision and you want to be a part of making it a reality, then help us attract others who are interested. Help us to nurture and grow as leaders together so that we can deploy more and more activists and more change agents in the world. We at All Souls have a clear purpose and a clear vision, and we need to throw a little more fuel on the fire. I think we can have an exponentially larger impact in this city. The time has never been better and has never been more right for a religious people and community with our values to put those values forward as a model to this community about what it means to be religious, what it really means to be religious, and what it means to have a modern religious understanding of ourselves and our lives. Now, one kind of necessary fuel, of course, is money. And this being the time of year when we need to raise money to complete our budget and to set a budget for next year. We don't talk about money that often. We talk about it once a year so that we don't have to talk about it all year long. But this is the time. And we need probably about $100,000 of new money between now and the end of December in order to balance our budget and end strong on this budget. And we need to know what the pledges of our members are going to be for 2015 so we can set the budget. And I'd like to do some great things. I'd like to move things exponentially forward. We are having an impact. There are so few churches that I hear about today that are having the kind of tangible, direct impact that we're having, and it's time for us to continue to grow this. We had a seminary class. We had young ministers in training from 29 different places around the country who are here studying what we're doing and how to do it, so that we're seeing more and more of that. I'm being invited and our other ministers to conferences to speak, and other churches are coming here to find out what we're doing. So we are really in a place and right at a moment in the life of this church where we can make a difference. So I want to ask you to be as generous as you can. We're going to have another offering in just a moment. And for those who are online, we have a place where you can click to make a gift for 2014 and a pledge for 2015. And we'd love to have you join us in pledging. We have some of our folks who watch online from different states who are giving money and bank drafts and credit card monthly payments to support us, but we need a lot more, and this is a chance for us to do that right now. So I want us to increase our impact locally, nationally, and internationally exponentially in the next few years. And in order to do that, the question I have for you is, are you in? Are you in? Are you with us? Are you fully with us? Are you just doing that little bit that you can do because you're like, hey, I can do that, it's from my surplus? Or are you really saying, I'm in? This is a core commitment of my life, All Souls, what it does for me, what it does for this community, and what I hope it'll do for the world. If you are, I ask you to make that kind of a sacrificial gift, a gift that really makes a difference, a gift that you say, hey, you know, this is a little more than I was thinking about. This might mean changing some other things that we decide to do with our lives, but you know what? It's worth it because this is what matters, and this says more about who I am in the world than a lot of the other things I spend my money on that are just for myself. We ask people to give 5% of their income to the church, recognizing that people give in the plate offerings and to a lot of other organizations. I'm sure that most of our members give 10% of their money to various things, but we don't expect all of it. But 5% is what we ask you to try to do with your income for All Souls. And I hope that you're with us and are going to be a part of this in the year to come. It is time now for you to pour fuel on the fire of this vision. And with that, I would invite Rick to come play some music for us, and I would ask our ushers to pass the baskets. You can put a pledge card in there for 2015, a gift if you can to help us make up the balance for 2014. I thank you for being a part of this. We need some large gifts today, but I hope that whatever you give, it makes your heart sing So give, not until it hurts, give until you feel really, really good.